I am Bryce Newberger, and this is the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix, Chapter 9. Block after block, Amora watched as Teddy stacked the toys. She let out a deep sigh. Cal had run off, Eldrich had to work, and Mother had gone to catch Cal, then visit Father. Even together with Teddy, she felt lonely. The day had passed with tranquility after the ruckus of the morning. She did her best to keep her youngest brother happy, but wished that he would talk more. Most 3-year-olds didn't know when to keep quiet. Teddy didn't know when to speak up. He had always been silent, content, and in his own little world. They had sat at the play table for hours without so much as a coo or giggle, save for a quick chiding from Amora when Teddy attempted to throw blocks across the room. Amora stretched and leaned her chair back so it balanced on 2 legs. "Ugh!" Teddy groaned. Amora looked at him to see he was giving her a derisive look, his way of saying, "Mom said not to do that." With an eye roll, she set her chair back down and decided it was time to poke around the house for something better to do. Cleaning the house should do. She thought of her mother returning home to a nice, neat house, in tow with her father. They would hug her and tell her what a responsible daughter she was. Her mind was made up. The house would be clean when her parents got home, and immediately she set herself to work. Eldrich rubbed his hands through his sweaty brown hair. He was at his wit's end. He had retrieved the rapier from Cal and resumed his attempts to sharpen it. Nothing he did to the silver weapon would affect it. How could he sharpen it if he couldn't even nick it? He remembered his father had some literature in the back from his apprentice days. Bryn had always said, "You never know what you're gonna forget." He'd always laugh at the ironic statement as he tapped the book to his brain. Eldrich retrieved the book titled The Blacksmith's Almanac. The book was littered with big grown-up words and had no pictures. From what Eldrich could tell, it didn't have anything that would help with an unsharpenable blade. He tossed the book onto the desk his father used for calculations. He noticed the log book that held all the orders commissioned. He was flipped open to the last page. Eldrich looked at one of the last entries. It was for a punching dagger. The Commission 2 field had been scribbled over. He remembered Skadel rummaging through their house and returning with a punching dagger. He called it the murder weapon. Eldrich stared hard at the page, trying to read the name behind the scribbles. "There," Amora said with a smile of satisfaction as she slapped her hands together, signifying she was done with cleaning the kitchen. It would have sparkled had it not been made of anything other than wood. The corner of the room resounded with giggling and applause as Teddy complimented his sister on the good work. "Why, thank you, Theodore," Amora said in an over-polite manner. She was feeling very mature. Teddy turned back to his toys, but accidentally knocked over his block tower. They spilt all over the floor. He turned back to Amora with a sheepish look of apology. Amora grunted. "I'm going to clean Ma and Pa's room. Those had better be picked up by the time I get out," as she stormed into her parents' room. Not wanting to be left alone, Teddy slipped out of his chair and started to stack his tower on the floor where he could watch her work. In her parents' room, she could see the green monster had torn through all their drawers. There was a smashed wooden chest at the foot of the bed. She guessed this is where Skadel had found that weapon. Splintered wood covered extra sheets and pillows that this chest seemed to be used for holding. It wasn't much of a storage place for murder weapons, she thought. Amora removed all of the contents so the wood chips could be shaken out. Then something caught her eye that she did not expect. With the chest empty, one could see that there was actually a false bottom. Skadel must not have seen it because it was undisturbed. Surely he would have smashed it open otherwise. It was locked with a small iron padlock. With her interest piqued, she gave the padlock a hard tug, but it wouldn't give. She started to look for the key. Eldrich couldn't make out what the original written name was, though he could see some indentions from a pen stroke. Upset, he slammed the page over and grabbed his forehead with frustration. He had tons of work to do. He couldn't sharpen the stupid sword, and his father had been taken away. Everything was going wrong. In a fury, he moved to tear the page out, but then he noticed it. Staring at the back of the page, with thick black scribbles out of the way, the indentions, though backwards, were more visible. He started to sound out the shapes. S-ga, He frowned with effort. Skad. Eldrich heard a noise behind him. He turned to see Skadel standing in the doorway. I see you have what I came here for, boy. His bulky shape cast a long shadow over Eldrich. He gripped the silver sword firmly. Aha! Amora had found a key in her father's nightstand. She rushed over to the hidey hole and fit the key in. With a satisfying clink, the padlock opened. She lifted the false bottom. A brown sack of drakes and a flintlock pistol stood out among other boring-looking paperwork. She had never seen the pistol before. As she thought about it, she realized she had never seen any pistol before. She lifted it up, and it was surprisingly heavy and solid feeling. It had intricate metal work ingrained with the polished wood. She pulled back a lever on top and made a delightful series of clicks. She rubbed the polished metal barrel. As she thumbed the hole, she wondered what went down there. Pressing the barrel to her eye, she took a long, hard look. Bang! Amora was startled as Teddy had knocked over his blocks again. He was now looking through the door at Amora. His lips pursed as he shook his head. He chided her. I know what I'm doing, Teddy, she protested in exasperation. He walked over to see what she was up to and reached for the gun. He wanted to turn. No, no, Amora said, emphasizing each no by poking the barrel into his chest. This is too dangerous for you. He frowned and looked to see what else was in the chest. Amora placed the gun in the nightstand to keep it away from children like Teddy. Hand it over, demanded Skadel to Eldrich. The boy clasped the book to his chest and raised the sword at the beastman. Skadel laughed. Well, if that ain't the prettiest thing I ever saw. He unhooked a giant axe from his belt. But this here is a real weapon. For an unknown reason, Eldrich wasn't the least bit scared. Get out of my shop, he demanded. Oh, that's quite authoritative for a little git like you. He hefted his axe menacingly. How's about we see what you can do with that shimmery little dandy like that? Skadel swung his axe high over Eldrich's head to scare him, but the boy parried it and sent the meaty arm recoiling back. Ouda! Skadel said, confused. Then he swung for real. Eldrich jumped sideways, letting his blade catch the back of the axe and let it to the ground, where it planted itself firmly in the dirt floor. Eldrich used the moment of confusion to point his blade at the throat of his opponent. Skadel looked bewildered, but it didn't last. He quickly backhanded Eldrich to the ground. As he fell, Skadel planted his boot firmly on Eldrich's chest, forcing the air out of him. Well, then that was fun. He leaned in, grabbing the book from Eldrich, and tore out the page he had been working on. After tossing the book with a hard shove back to Eldrich, Skadel walked out of the room. I was never here, he said. Isabel sat in front of a mirror in her room deep in the Mages Guild. It was lavishly furnished, but what stood as peculiar was the foam covering the walls. Not many mages actually stayed in the Mages Tower. It was for privileged only, and that title definitely applied to her. Her abilities were unique and limited, but in that regard she was a specialist. Every mage had one calling to magic, one special thing that they could do. It was like being naturally athletic or having reading come easy. Mages just had an advanced understanding and application of the elements of nature. Sure, they could try to learn more than one avenue of magic, but it was forbidden as it had caused every person yet to attempt it to go mad. And while their power had grown, they had no control over themselves. These individuals were known as terrors and were rumored to be used as assassins for those sick or twisted enough to utilize them. Of the normal mages, there were your basic mages like fire casters, earth shakers, or water workers. These elements are easy to display, and other mages consider them dull and basic. Then you have more advanced practitioners, like a shadow bender, able to wrap themselves in shadow, or blot out light, or bloodmancers, able to stop the flow of blood in a being, or keep it flowing away from a mortal wound. Then there was Isabel. She had never met one who could do what she was able to. She pinned a sketch in front of her mirror and took a deep breath. This was always very painful. Her nose was straight-bridged and her cheeks were high-boned and gaunt. She pressed firmly on them until a few pops shifted them into softer features. She reworked her face like this until it matched the picture. Then it was time for coloration. She looked deep into her purple irises, focusing until her head ached with pressure. The purple turned green, then blue. Next, she shaved her raven head bare. Then, with the same type of focus, her scalp began to push out brunette hair. Her screams reached deafening heights from the painful process, thus providing the reason she had foam on her walls, which aided in soundproofing her chamber. Overall, the process took about 30 minutes to complete, and another 20 minutes to touch up with makeup and perfect. Now done, she looked at the drawing, then at herself. She decided she looked just like Ada. Smiling to herself, she wondered if she would get the chance to kiss that handsome Bryn one more time. Thank you for listening. I'm Bryce Newberger, and this has been the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix. If you enjoyed what you heard and you'd like to purchase the full book, then either look up New Books on the Google Play bookstore, NEU Books, or simply click the link in the description. The book is only $5, and I appreciate your support.